you. I really appreciate the opportunity that Andy made for me to get to know him and his network better, as well as be a part of this experience here with you today. So I want to share some information with you that is about a couple of topics that I'm really passionate about. So first off, it's the work that I do directly with people. I work as a coach and consultant with entrepreneurs and sales organizations. So there's always a drive with the people who I work with to build something, create something, bring something new into the world, transform a system or an idea or an experience, and that gives me energy. I absolutely love to be around that, where there's a sizzle, there's a crackling in the air, there's a desire to bring something new into an experience. And the second is story. So I've spent a lot of time studying what really creates transformational change for people, for systems, for large organizations, for cultures. I really find that to be fascinating, that there is a method, there are patterns at work where transformational change comes into that world. And what I have discovered and where I found a lot of relevance and meaning and personal connection is when that gets connected to the concept of narrative or story. So the good news is, you can see we have a few different screens here for the PowerPoint presentation, that storytelling is something that's obviously been around with us in humanity since the beginning of recorded civilization. It was one of the very first ways that thoughts, ideas, learning was shared with people, often in a religious context, and then further, certainly in an academic context. And so story is something that has been a part of us and a part of our shared conversation and culture forever. And I have found that the concept of story, as it gets applied into a business setting, can be enormously fruitful and rewarding and exhilarating. I also know that when I have gone to study and learn about more of the story frameworks that people talk about as being so critical to this experience, I'm put almost instantly to sleep. So I'm not sure if you've gone to study The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell, right? Maybe some of you are aware of that. It's one of my absolute favorite concepts, this idea of this myth and monomyth, and that creates the sense of connection, purpose, and meaning, and it exists in all of our entertainment and our teaching methodologies and even our business marketing. But going to sit and study the role of Osiris in 7th century BC Egypt doesn't leave me feeling practically aware of what to do tomorrow to further my business. So I feel a little bit like that story. I don't think it's an apocryphal one. I think it's an accurate story of when Steve Jobs and Wozniak in the late 70s, early 80s went to Xerox PARC. Is anyone familiar? What was in Xerox PARC?
They stole.
Yeah, they stole, right? Well, legally stole, I guess, legitimately stole. But what was there? The mouse, the graphical user interface. So here you have these brilliant minds working for Xerox out in Silicon Valley. So they have to have a presence in Silicon Valley, even though the company's in the Northeast. And these people are creating these incredible new transformational technologies that are just sitting on the shelf. No one knows what to do. They're engineers and they have an incredible mind and gift for creating these new things, and it's just not doing anything. It's not going anywhere. It took the insight of Steve Jobs and his partners to go in and say, we know how to make this real for people. We know how to actually bring this to life, and then through a stealing or contractual licensing, however that played out, they were able to take that and through Apple change the face of computing. So the passion I have is to take all of this knowledge, wisdom, and insights that comes from studying how stories transformationally change people, but make it real and bring it to life. So if you have a story, what's the foundation of the story? Conflict, right? And there's a term that starts with A that people use. Arc. So I want to give you what I believe is the arc when you're an entrepreneur looking to do something significant and meaningful. You can see on the screens here. It would be a lot nicer if it looked like the hockey stick, I suppose, that people talk about when they look at starting a business. But at least in my experience, that has not been the case. It's not always this idea of having a great idea and then hitting some magic experience and then boom, we're up into never-ending profits. It tends to look a little bit more like a great idea, lots of struggle, a dip into despair and disorientation, and then likely a shift and a flip that occurs and growth that results. So this has been, right, my experience with how powerful it is, how challenging it is to do something innovative and meaningful, and how much of a wild ride it can be. So in order to put a little more life to this in context, I want to use an example of somebody who I've already referenced and who is well known in the, in the general business community. So consider Steve Jobs, someone who obviously now, with his great successes at Apple and passing, tragic passing too early in his life, we think of as being this just incredible person who has the Midas touch and, was, maybe a little bitter pill to swallow, a jagged pill to swallow at times, but, was brilliant. But it was not an unbelievable rocket ship ride to success that he experienced. So if you look at the beginning of what I have here, this is obviously the model, it's a simplification. There's a lot more to the story than this, but these are some of the highlights that I see. He founded Apple very young in his life and certainly in his business career. And had some initial success. I mean, he and Wozniak, through all sorts of just hard work, risk-taking, bravado, were able to get some new things out there in the marketplace that substantially changed the world and put Apple on the map. And it was amazing. And then he had the big Super Bowl ad with Mac and the sort of fighting the power and truth to power sort of, and it just was incredible to see what was happening to Apple and how the world was taking notice. And then it really went south in a hurry. And the whole story is not worth recounting and sharing, but he got into a tremendous amount of internal struggle and fights within Apple. A number of projects that he got attached to really didn't go anywhere and created a division within the organization. And he really, his stock, so to speak, within the company sank. And his position, reputation in the marketplace was not good. And at the bottom here, he was forced out of the company that he created. And if any of you have ever seen, the commencement speech at Stanford, he talks a bit about that. It was painful medicine for him. He considered just, leaving the valley, quitting, throwing in the towel, and going elsewhere. A tremendous amount of internal confusion. So what did he do? He decided to get back on the horse, created Next, which was an organization focused on doing some of the work that he wasn't able to do or complete at Apple. Got involved with Pixar, it's kind of miraculous how that happened. Toy Story came out, had some success, started to rise back up, got an opportunity through a fascinating acquisition of Next by Apple to rejoin Apple, and went on to do some of the most amazing things that the world's ever seen. If you read his biography, and you've listened to any of the commencement speeches that he made, presentations about this story, he talks about the base of this that we're looking at, where really he was in pain and misery and discomfort as being crucial to his development. So what I believe is that had he not gone through those struggles and challenges and learned from them and gotten over some aspects of himself and embraced the opportunity and discovered what it would be to actually make these things happen, they wouldn't have come to pass. So it's the struggle as much as the reward. It's the learning in the trenches as much as the brilliant ideas that allow someone to make it through the crucible that's so critical to experience in order to get there. So what is really happening here in this example that I shared? At the beginning, there's a belief, a call to do something. You know, this idea, it rarely comes in a way that sounds exactly that way. And sometimes it is someone offering you a job or offering you an opportunity. Sometimes it's an intuitive sense that I need to do something that I'm not doing right now. I need to experience something that is not in my life. And I've had that. I remember even having that at an earlier age if I wasn't quite sure what that even felt or what that meant or how to put that into context. Then we get some enthusiasm and some adrenaline. We get a bump just by being in that game and by having exciting conversations with people. And then inevitably we get hit in the mouth and it hurts. We have struggles, we have limitations, we hit roadblocks. Sometimes they're financial, sometimes they're political, sometimes they're relationship oriented. And then we hit this base here where we wonder why we're doing what we're doing and why we put ourselves in this situation and why life needs to be so difficult. Why is this really worth it? And that is absolutely perfect. Not fun, not enjoyable, but absolutely perfect because it's here where the choice gets made. And the dotted line here is where a lot of decisions go. I don't want to suggest that this is, guaranteed to be successful and guaranteed to work all the time. Sometimes people opt out, throw in the towel, blame the market, blame, somebody else. But for those who hang in there, that's where the shift happens. That's where the skill gets developed. That's where the baggage gets left. And then the breakthroughs occur, the growth happens, and then on to the next adventure. So what I'm aware of, and this is a real key point I want you to take away from the talk here, is that when people talk about story and narrative related to a business, when people think of an arc of a message playing out in their professional life, they typically think of it externally. They think I have to create a story that my prospects or clients are going to resonate with. I have to come up with a metaphor that has meaning for them. I've got to somehow engage the cultural zeitgeist in something that has currency. I think all of that is true, but my experience of actually running a business and growing it and surviving the pitfalls is that that story's got to be viewed and got to be turned inside. That consciousness and awareness of how this plays out on an individual leadership level is crucial. And without this being in place, the external work, the external focus of these principles really don't matter as much. It's an inside-out sort of thing. So I call this the courageous path, which really speaks to me as a crucial and illuminating piece of work to do. This is where I have passion and interest, and this is how I want to help people do their work. So some of these steps here you can see are about authoring the future, listening to this internal voice. What do I need to do? What's important to me? How do I step into this unknown, run towards the danger? That's I think a Marine type of run toward the gunfire. There are people, those of us in this room are crazy enough to do that. When I hit this challenge, this struggle at the base of the curve here, how do I find the heroism within myself to embrace, to stay connected to what's important, to endure the challenges and struggle of transformation, of change, of bringing new into the world, cracking open the safe, doing more than just what I've always done, allowing a new part of myself to emerge, shedding the old, And then sign your masterpiece. This is where I own and I integrate who I am. I'm changed as a result of this. The transformation takes root, and I've become a different person, a different leader, a different figure in the world. It's different for me, it's different for the people around me, and the business that I've built has been impacted. I want to suggest here that this dip, and I've already alluded to this earlier in the presentation, is the most important part. And this is a complex, maybe psychological issue, so I want to use a metaphor to explain it. And obviously today we don't have time to get into the real depth of it. But I view all of us like this unfinished stone sculpture. I think that's just a great metaphor for us. That within, so we're all sort of born as this block of stone that doesn't have definition. There's nothing really that is, clear about what that stone looks like or could be. But in it, there is something that's beautiful. There is a masterpiece. And the life's work that we have, and I think especially for those of us who are committed to being entrepreneurs, to being thought leaders, our work is to bring that masterpiece out. And some of that comes with vision. Some of that comes with the idealism of what could be possible. Seeing a block of stone, but knowing that in it is something beautiful. And then some of it, and this is what a lot of people don't want to either hear or don't want to hang in with, is the chipping away of all the stone that's obscuring it, of all that's blocking it. And I wish there were a painless way of doing that, but I don't believe there truly is. It just is, it's the medicine people have to take, that was the metaphor that Steve Jobs used. It's whatever you call it, it's difficult. But I believe that's how our greatness is forged, and that's how our powerful and unique internal talents come out. So it tests you. When you start a business and you hit a wall, it tests you. It tests your resolve, tests your creativity, tests your perseverance. And that's helpful because it's through that test that you learn, grow, evolve, and change. You benefit from this. The world benefits from it. And you're transformed as a result. So I would never want people to feel good about something that's painful or challenging, but I think that recognizing the value and knowing that going through the struggle and the challenge of doing something like this has purpose and meaning and context makes it easier to do. I've worked with lots of people they're in the middle of starting something and it feels like this may be a Woody Allen quote, like a meaningless nightmare of suffering, that what I'm doing is just, it's draining me, financially, my marriage is on the rocks. I mean, it's really testing me. And in the absence of context, that can feel pointless and masochistic. I believe that, while that may not feel good, and I may feel sad that someone's going through that, that might be exactly what they need to experience the breakthrough that they want. And so it may not be something to celebrate, but it is something to respect. And with the right approach and the right level of understanding, something that is the accelerator that's needed. I want to give a couple of other examples here before I give you a chance to consider some of these ideas for yourself. Walt Disney, right in this area, someone who's a very well-known figure and obviously did a lot to change the world forever, and has placed an indelible stamp on how we think about entertainment. Well, it was not the hockey stick ride to success. He, in the Midwest, I think it was in Kansas City, decided that animation was the game he wanted to be in. Felt very excited about that. Had a small team of people. His brother came out here to Southern California, got some traction, and was a rising star. Hit some very significant distribution challenges, and if any of you know the story, he actually had his whole business, except for I think one partner, which was his brother, just taken away from him. They just hired the whole company away from him, and he was left with next to nothing. And so was, at that point, broke without the company that he had created, and had some very difficult choices to make going forward, and consider quitting, doing something else like any of us would in that moment. But he decided to persevere, to rebuild the company, and it was in that time, in that experience, that he came up with Mickey Mouse. Steamboat Willie became Mickey Mouse, and then on to success from that. Expanded his work, created the Disney empire, and then went through this version with lots of other things, with theme parks, Disney World, and all of those challenges, those struggles were really forged in the ability to persevere and overcome adversity that had gotten in his way. Another person in more of a political realm is Jimmy Carter. So when I was younger, Jimmy Carter was president, and I remember that. And even at that time knew that there were a lot of challenges with that presidency. But he rose to popularity post-Watergate, came as an outsider to win the presidency after the challenges that the company had experienced, or that the country had experienced with the tumultuous early 70s. Did not have a great presidency, I think, by most objective standards. Struggled economically. I think probably some great things, later, which were respected internationally, but lost a pretty difficult election. Had the hostages freed on Ronald Reagan's inauguration day, and so had a choice to make about where he was going to go and what he was going to do. And so his desire was to focus on what he was good at and how he could bring that into the world. And his impact on the world through humanitarian issues was very clear. And he was able to get involved in very high-profile efforts and be, potentially one of the most impactful ex-U.S. presidents in history. Amazing to see someone who experienced struggle, and I'm not sure failure is the right word, maybe a little too strong, but on the largest stage imaginable, and bounced back and used it as a way to clarify who he was, what he wanted to do, and how to make the world different as a result of him being here. So a number of questions I'd like you to consider. We'll have another exercise in here in a second where I really want you to focus in on your particular situation. But just to tee this up, a few things at these various stages that may or may not be impacting you, I'd like you to consider. What's your call to action? If you're at the beginning of this and you're ready to launch into an adventure, what is that? Is that something you're aware of? Is it something you've ignored? Something that's just coming into focus now? If you're already there, how can you leave the next one? How can you leave the safety of your current situation? Sometimes we clarify what we want to do and where we want to go, and we talk about it, but we don't really give that a chance to happen or take root. If you figure that out and you're out in the vulnerable wilderness and really experiencing some struggle, you might need to say, how do I endure the struggle and confusion that you're experiencing? You could be doing exactly the right thing you need to do, and it just hasn't turned out yet. How do you endure that? Maybe you've gotten through some of that challenge and struggle, and you're starting to go up the curve a bit here. What do these struggles teach you about yourself? So this is back to the idea that you're not really going to change the world until you change yourself. What do you need to change? What's the next step of evolution for you that's relevant? And then finally, what about you needs to stay the same, and what about you needs to change? It's the evolution of us that really allows us to continue forward and take on new challenges, not just solve the same problems again and again and again. So a great thing about being transformational is you get, the fun, the enthusiasm, the newness that comes, and you also have to say goodbye to things that maybe got you to where you are today, but no longer fit. So the key here, and this is really where I was showcasing it earlier, related to that unfinished stone sculpture metaphor. Many leaders do endure. There certainly, I've worked with lots of tough people who can weather the storm, but they don't always evolve, they don't always shift. And so what is that part of you that can shift? Where's the evolution? What's the learning, right? It can be challenging enough to go through the struggle of building something, but at least allow that struggle to pay off. At least learn and get the wisdom and guidance that can come from facing that. As I said earlier, I've gone to a lot of lectures and presentations about story, most of which put me to sleep very quickly. They're fascinating and they're interesting, but it's just so abstract and esoteric that it's not something that I could ever connect to my daily life. I'd like you to think about some of these symptoms that you might be experiencing in your entrepreneurial life. Could be something very directly related to a business, or it could be something, I know becoming a parent was one of the most challenging, talk about riding the wave, on a every 5-minute sort of basis. So whatever way that these questions fit, I'd like you to consider the questions, and if you want to take down some notes or share with some people at your table, I think that would be a good thing to do. We can be a bit flexible with how we approach this. So think about your situation right now, and if you're feeling bored or stuck, maybe you're in a situation where you haven't quite stepped into what you need to be doing, or you have done that and you're looking for something new. What voice in your head have you been ignoring that you now need to listen to? If you're feeling bored or stuck, ask yourself that question, reflect, write down some notes, maybe share with your neighbor. If you're feeling partially effective, like some of what I'm doing feels great, some of it is dragging me down, how can I burn the ships and fully engage? So that's a metaphor people, I'm sure you've heard it before, the landing at the new, the new continent, the new country, and say we're going to war. I'm not sure if we're going to win, but we just burned the ship, so we're not going home. So you take the safety valve away. Often this is a key part that business people need to do when really going forward in a serious way of developing something. Gotta take the option away. Feeling disoriented and or hopeless, right? So that would be the base there of this curve. The sort of painful feeling of not understanding what's happening and how you got in this spot. How can you hang in through this challenging time? In what can you put your faith? I mean that just totally openly. So some people want to put their faith in a higher power. Some people put their faith in the market. Some people put their faith in their investors. Some people put faith in their network of friendships. But it is important because it's very disorienting to be in that struggle. Feeling hopeful but not clear. So we've turned the corner a little bit, feeling somewhat better, but not totally clear on what's happening. What talent or ability do I need to unlock? And what about me needs expression? What about me needs to step into the full view here? Finally, feeling relieved but not different, right? So you've made it through, you found some success, but it doesn't quite feel like you've had the shift or the evolution that's necessary. How am I different as a result of what I've experienced? So looking back after this, how am I different? What needs to change? What needs to be a new part of my identity and how I show up? So there's a very short amount of time to talk about big concepts like this, but I think that when you get to a level of clarity about an issue like this, it can be a sort of instantaneous type of learning. And I really hope that there's something that grabbed you today about the idea to be called to do something, right? Having that internal voice in your head, say this is important. The world needs this. I need to have this impact. That's really something to pay attention to. Or perhaps this idea of I've really got to fully commit. I've got to step into what I'm doing. and not do this halfway. Or I'm in the storm. The ship is at sea. I'm in a storm, and I've lost my bearings. I need to endure this. It will pass. Or there's a learning here. What I've learned about myself is that I can do this, or I've got to find a different way to share my story, or I've got to form different relationships, or I've got to take a different approach. That's a very meaningful learning, and it's the gift that comes from weathering that storm. Or it's time to evolve. It's time for me to step into the new person that these experiences and these victories along the way have earned me, and I will emerge changed as a result. Thank you very much for engaging here today. I think it's time for some Q&A, so I'll hand it over here.